Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Paul Hirsch. Today's topic, why B2B marketing is so bad and what to do about it. This is a continuation of our What Your Agency Wants to Tell You But Won't series. Now, Paul has been in the agency business his entire career, including art director at Goodby, EVP and creative director at Leo Burnett, founder of Division of Labor, executive creative director at Havas, and now the recently named CEO and chief creative officer at Doremus, a B2B shop. So he's coming out of a lot of creative, a lot of B2C, and now he's in B2B. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I'm happy to be here. Congrats on the podcast. It's kind of funny. As a creative, I feel a little bit like out of place on your podcast, which is full of like CMOs. I feel like it's like caddy day at the country club, and I'm just like barging in.
All right, well, we'll go with that. And here's the first. So I'm going to ask you the first shot. What should we do with this first shot? Here it is. Give us an overview on B2B as seen through the lens of an agency. And let's talk about the marketing problem we referenced in that title. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, even to start, I think even in this thing, hopefully anyone at home watching this, like if we mention certain words like breakthrough or like KPIs, like should take a shot. There should be something, we should have some ground rules for that. But look, I think certainly B2B is in the spotlight right now. It's having a moment, people are posting about it. People are writing about it. Last year, Cannes had their first ever, B2B Lion, and it was a big honor, humbling honor to help lead that jury. So it's really exciting. But you mentioned there are problems, and there are a lot of them. I mean, too often B2B marketers, they're not approaching B2B the right way. They don't invest. They don't take risks. There are too many stakeholders. And perhaps worst of all, B2B companies, they kind of expect this thing to happen like right away. Like we bring in a CMO, we put some money in, and boom, something's going to happen. It's not a bag of chips. It isn't Doritos. It isn't a can of Coke. It's not a pizza for $9.99. I mean, this stuff, B2B, there are complex sales cycles. There's the proverbial funnel. Things take 12 months to happen. You're dealing with millions of dollars in, a product. It's hard.
So let me make sure I'm hearing this right, and so our listeners get it. Here's what I hear you say. You got a big B2B business infrastructure that is designed for the long term. And now you are sticking a very short-term marketing focus on this at the tail end without any of the planning that might go into the other functions. Is that a fair assessment of what you just said? Like, am I summarizing it right?
Absolutely. I don't think there could be a truer statement. I mean, look, being a CMO is it's a tough freaking job, having friends in there, my sister-in-law, shout out to Jillian Bayless is a CMO. I mean, that's a tough job. That is the hot seat. I know you explore this on every episode, but like you are brought in to make a change. And oftentimes there are so many things that are out of control. Could be sales, could be the product. And so you have to turn this around. You have to produce a result like on a time frame.
So you get this time frame. But you're also saying the time frame from a lot of B2B companies is, even though they will acknowledge the sales cycle might be a year or 2 years long, they will not acknowledge the marketing cycle for anything except almost instant oatmeal on this. I just add water in there, I get great marketing. So if I'm a marketer, how do I even think about this when I'm approaching B2B or an agency? Like I let's acknowledge that this is probably an issue. What should I do if I'm an agency or a marketer in this space?
Well, I think the first thing is a marketer, if we're talking from that side, or as an agency, the first thing you have to do is get in there. You need the trust. You need the trust with the agency. You got to develop that kind of long-term plan, that learning agenda. you need to try and set something up where you set yourself up for success. If we're talking about problems in the C-suite with the CMO, you got to fix some of the stuff that goes around that stuff. And then you need to take the long view. You need to invest. You need to work with your partners and try and convince them that running a campaign, whatever that is, could be anything, is not going to be the panacea that's going to solve everything. I mean, it isn't. If you think writing a manifesto, putting together some cheap idea video filled with stock footage is going to solve your problems, you're wrong. It's never going to happen.
So by definition, you've just said a lot of B2B companies, that's their answer to marketing. Right?
Yes.
So a lot of these orgs are very sales driven or maybe product driven. How do I get an org like that to think long term and to adopt what you just said, which would be, and I think you've also said very few B2B companies really do testing of marketing, though they will do a lot of product and other testing. How do you, as an agency and a marketer, team up to get companies to think about marketing in a different way?
Well, I mean, that's always the trick, isn't it? I mean, I think you have to kind of, I think first and foremost, you need to have kind of that shared vision of what marketing can do. You know, you need to kind of put some parameters down of what it's going to do. And in terms of that, the long term, I do think you have to plan for the long term. You have to realize that you need to engage your customer wherever they are, or whoever they are, with the tools you have available. And not everything is going to cost you a ton of money. You have a website. You know, there is kind of what different layers, you know, we call it, you know, the connect, convince, commercialize layer. You know, it's the brand at the top, demand gen at the bottom. Yeah. And there's everything that goes in there. And, you know, there's a lot of agencies out there that they say they do B2B advertising, but they don't. They do advertising for a B2B company. And what they're going to do is they're going to put out a video, the best of them, and there's some great ones out there, get a Super Bowl commercial. But there's more to it than that. The funnel is bigger than that. You need to engage. So beyond that, everything that happens in the middle of that, where you're engaging customers, you're talking about white papers, you're talking about videos themselves, you're talking about demos, you're talking about all sorts of other campaigns that you need to create. So you talk about this stuff. As a CMO, I think you have to establish more work for yourself a little bit, more content that's going to help people and drive those sales. So it's not it's not a set and it's going to do your work for you 9 months later. You got to constantly update that stuff. You got to constantly reach stuff.
And in a B2B play, by definition, I have a very targeted segment. So I have to, you're telling me I have to nurture that segment and I have to convince everybody that I'm nurturing it versus just telling it to buy stuff. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the key to marketing. That's the key to advertising. I mean, I
think it's even harder in B2B because the sales cycle is so long and it's harder to test with that long sales cycle. And you've said nobody cares. I believe that's one of your things. Nobody cares about your stuff really, unless you kind of really punch it out there. Elaborate on the nobody cares line.
You know, there's a great San Francisco admin, this guy, Howard Luck-Gossage, who said something to the effect of like, people read what they like, and sometimes that's an ad. And I truly believe that because nobody cares. Nobody out there is looking for your specific ad. They're not waiting for it. They're not opening up, you know, the internet, their computer. They're not opening up their newspaper. They're not turning on their TV for like online video or anything like that and expecting to see your work. They're just not. Nobody cares. They're not doing that. And especially, you know, you talk about digital, you know, nobody's clicking on banners. Who's clicking on banners? This is an industry where like 3% is a success rate. 97% of it is garbage. I mean, I can't remember the last time I clicked on a banner on the internet. Mike, I don't know about you, but like,
I don't know that I've ever clicked on a banner.
Maybe on Instagram because they know I'm looking at like a Montreal Expos hat and I'm going to get served that up. So maybe that's going to happen. But like,
go Expos.
Go Expos.
Okay,
awesome.
Keep going. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the nobody cares discussion.
No,
So
but it's tough. I think
nobody cares. Nobody cares about the ads, and then B2B, it might even be harder because you have a very, depending, you could be selling software as a service. You could be selling something directly to, the CFO, and if you could be sending very specific markets. How do you? And those people are bombarded because everyone knows where they are. How do you make them care?
I think that goes to finding, I think it's the strategy that you have. I mean, it goes back to creative, to a certain extent. And, I could talk about creative all day. I know Clive Serkin talked about creative. He's the wrong guy. Joking. I love Clive. No, you have to start with a compelling message. You have to, strategically, you have to find something that is interesting to your audience. And then you have to find a simple, compelling way to bring that forward.
So let me just jump in, because I think this is my experience with B2B has been, especially by the sales-driven thing. They want a list. That the company has a list, because when it gets actually to the buying area, or who's ever going to buy the product, they have a list. But that can't drive the marketing. And my assessment would be a huge amount of marketers have trouble taking what is the sales list or the operating list or all the product features you might have, and translating that into a piece of creative or strategy that isn't just a giant list of what the product does. Am I wrong about that or not?
No, you're not. You're not wrong. And I think that's where, I think that's where a little bit of a difference between B2B marketing and maybe B2C marketing is. And I do think I'll probably get a lot of shit for it. I do think, on the B2C side, you might have more traditionally trained marketers who come up through a marketing function, who realize all the tools that are at the disposal, that you don't have to say everything, jam it in one particular place. That's the genius of marketing. There's a right place at the right time to deliver the right message.
Yeah, and that every media has its job.
Every media has its job. So when you are doing something, if you're creating a 15-second pre-roll for something, you only have so much space for it. It's I remember not too long ago, we were asked to write a radio spot, and this writer wrote this great radio spot for this one product. I won't mention what it is. And client came back and gave comments, specific product comments about this, which totally destroyed what it was. But all he wrote back after that was like, instead of a 30, he was like, that would make it a 43-second commercial.
Yeah.
And so every piece of communication has its strength and its weakness. And as a marketer, you need to know that so you can target what you're saying to the right person at the right time when they're ready to do that, especially like the heavy stuff. And I think that's the difference with B2B. That's the thing, with Doremus. I mean, we've been around 120 years. We know the stuff. We've been B2B all that time. And we know the heavy shit. That's what we specialize in. And there's a lot of information that needs to be communicated. And it just doesn't all happen in one tidy little package. There is a different point in each part of the marketing journey, or the consumer journey, or the marketing mix, whatever you want to say, to deliver that information where the audience, the customer, whoever it is, the buyer, is going to be receptive to that.
Hey, so without naming one of your clients, when you look out there at the vast sea of B2B marketing, not a Doremus client, who would you say is doing a really good job of this?
I'm going to take the easy answer on that. And I'm just going to point to some great work, perhaps. And it's easy to say that one of the best pieces of B2B communications ever was, a Volvo truck ad from a few years ago with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
And they were talking, it was, commercial trucks, and they were talking about them and their steering and stuff like that. And he just did a split on these two semis that were going.
I remember this. Yeah.
And it was amazing. And it was simple. They were pointing out the very specific product benefit in a really compelling human sort of way. And that is the secret. There are advertisers who do that better than ever. Apple does it better than ever. At one point, they're going to deliver a really interesting brand message. The new phone is yellow. We're going to do some amazing animation about yellow. At the same time, we're also going to do work that is about retail and point of purchase. That's going to be, $8.99 for the new iPhone. So There is the two sides of this. There is the brand side, and the bottom line side of it. So it's a continuum. You can't. This is the biggest problem. One of the biggest. I keep saying the biggest problem, and there's so many.
All right, I've already listed. There's only 4 biggest problems, so I think we got to contain.
It's people start with the brand work and then forget about everything else, and thus you're not going to have any sales. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to bring anyone into your world. Or at the same time, they're going to go so demand gen that they're not going to develop a brand. And the brand, you need to develop a brand because at every touch point along the way, you need to remind consumers of who you are, why you exist, and why you are important. And that message changes at each.
Got it. Hey, so you were just named CEO after being the, Chief Creative Officer. What's it like to transition into this job?
It's terrifying. No, I'm joking. Look, I'm a creative. I'm the son of a designer. I love creative. I mean, my background, just.
It does scream creative. Yes.
It does. It screams creative.
So tell us about the transition. Yeah.
I think the transition's easy. I mean, it's this, I'm a chief creative officer, and I guess used to be president, now CEO. It's a bit of a side hustle. But I think it's really important because I think it just shows where our company is at, that creative is at the center of everything we do. Whether that's strategy, whether that's media, whether that's analytics, we're always trying to find out the most creative way to solve a problem. And so for me, having a creative at the center, it's not a big change. There's a thing, I'm going to totally butcher this thing. The restaurateur Danny Meyer's got a thing. It's called like the salt shaker principle. And he talks about it in the sense of like part of the job of running a restaurant is making sure that the salt shaker is at the same point every time. Like when a table gets taken apart and put back together, and that's part of the job, is to make sure that we are consistent in how we approach stuff, the craft we take, the diligence we put at stuff. So, just being a creative as a CEO is the same thing as doing the day-to-day job. It's just making sure that we have a creative solution, and we are in a creative business. I don't understand companies that don't think of this as a creative business. It's not math.
Got it. So let's just throw the CFO into the mix, because you got a lot of marketers sitting there in the B2B space where the CFO is super important, and the relationship between marketers and CFO is super important. Tell us about your relationship with your CFO, and then what you would recommend marketers do with their CFOs, because a lot of the tension is around the length of time creative takes to work, or the timing we just talked about. Give us some tips here.
Our CFO, Brian, I love our CFO. I give him a lot of shit sometimes, but he's always looking after the best way. And, I think with most CFOs, you have to present, and just most clients, you have to present a compelling economic argument for doing something. That if you do X, it's going to yield Y. I think that varies based on the company that you're in, because I do think that is, an issue that marketers face, that we face working with CMOs, is that a lot don't believe in that. They don't believe in the potential for incremental change. They think of it as pennies on the dollar. If I put in $1, I'm going to get $1.25 back. And I'm the guy who says, no, if you put in $1, you can get $5 back. That is the purpose of advertising and marketing. It's not the small change. That's nothing. You can do big things to move. And I think that is the thing that CMOs are tasked with, is those big changes. They come into a company, you got to make some change. So I think, working with the CFO, showing him that there is an economic advantage. I truly believe that creative ideas are an economic multiplier. I mean, you take a look at that, and
I agree with you. The real issue is, can you get them into the air long enough for them to multiply? Hey, okay, funniest story you can tell on the air.
We've spoken a little bit in the past about this, and you say, what some of the problems that people face. And, one of the things that, or if you're doing it wrong, we talk about this, like if you're not investing enough, you're not doing it right. If you, if you don't support your agency and not trust, you're not doing it right. And I think you were talking about something, because I know you've done this. You mentioned that you've always stayed with the agency when you came in as the
Yeah,
CMO.
never fired the agency when I've come. Never fired the creative agency when I've come in ever.
And I think that sort of trust is really one of the big things. And you talk about funny. We remember, and I saved this particularly for this, and I'm going to read this. Remember getting an RFP for a company to pitch their business. And I saved this because this is an epic thing. And this was in the RFP. This is the current state. It says, since 2019, we've had 2 CMOs searching for the third and 3 SVPs of corporate marketing. Also, our CEO and founder left. And we hired our first global creative director a month ago. And the brand director position didn't exist in Q1. So yeah, all this means is current brand guidelines and creative campaigns have gotten us to where we are and established good procedure. But 20, I'm not going to say the year, provides us with an opportunity to current leadership to proudly steer the ship in a refocused direction, to establish our brand in a way that's bold, accessible, and something everyone internally as well can wrap their arms and hearts and minds around. One brand to rule them all. One brand everyone can get behind that gives us the platform to tell people what we do and why it matters.
You're killing me with this. The other thing, since you did say was 2019, there's not that many years there, but that's like, welcome to the Titanic. See what you can do next.
I mean, there are so many things wrong with this. I mean, to me, this is like, this
is like if you had the Onion write an RFP, this is what would happen. The Onion would take this and write the RFP this way. Then it would put some hilarious salary in there. That was you were paid in like sodas or something.
Yeah.
So
local man looks for new agency. That's what they would say. But like, there's so many things in here that are like, are just trigger signs.
You couldn't make it funnier. I could get all the CMOs I know, and they couldn't make a funnier RFP on that. Hey, we're almost at time here. So last topic before we sign off. Any practical advice you have for our listeners, particularly on the B2B front, that we haven't talked about yet?
Look, I think there's a couple big themes for me. It's like, the first is take creative risks. Absolutely is what you do. I mean, one thing that we preach internally is like, you got to get effing smart about something. You got to, come up with a great idea, and then you got to repeat. And that's what you do. But you got to take creative risks. That is the whole point of what we do. To smart creative risks, not creative for creative's sake, smart strategic risk. That is the thing that you need to do. The other thing is you just can't. I think this is the problem on the B2B side we see all the time. And the problem for CMOs is a lot of stakeholders. You can't boil the ocean. You can't, from the amount of people to the amount of product things, you can't do that. It's got to be simplicity. Simplicity wins.
So I'm going to shorthand that for our listeners and say, here's what I heard you say. Take a creative risk that is designed to drive the business and have very few people voting. Like you need really like 1 or 2 voters, because the more voters you have, the more you sand on the edge. Fair?
Yeah, there aren't any statutes for committees.
Excellent. So thank you, Paul, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Evergreen, Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, which include an operations-trained CEO dishes on what he really thinks about marketing. A B-School professor talks about brand value, measures, and the metaverse, and a primer on the marketing CFO position. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.
Today's episode of CMO Confidential is brought to you by CMOcoaches.com. Are you a current or aspiring chief marketing officer looking to take your career to the next level? You should work with a CMO coach. CMO coaches are former CMOs who are nationally certified coaches. So whether you want to improve your leadership skills, develop your team, or drive better business results, we have the experience and expertise to help you succeed. To learn more, visit us at CMOcoaches.com.
Great careers are forged out of great relationships. Your success, whatever your field, relies and thrives on the support and insights of others. I'm Andy Lapata, an author and speaker on the power of professional relationships. In the Connected Leadership podcast, I have the privilege of interviewing people from around the world to understand the relationships that have made a difference on their journey and how their insights can help you. From Nobel Prize winners to Olympians, from NASA astronauts to peace campaigners, my guests have shared some captivating moments from their lives and careers. Combined with experts from leading universities, cutting-edge authors and giants of business, the Connected Leadership podcast aims to inspire, educate and entertain.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about my podcast called Can I Offer You Some Feedback? I'm a business consultant and executive coach with over 20 years experience in change management, leadership development, and naturally providing feedback to high performers. My podcast is for those of you who have a complicated relationship with feedback, whether giving, receiving, avoiding, or seeking. Feedback is essential for our development. In each episode, you'll hear from real people across industries with their ideas, perspectives, and best practices on feedback. I'll also be sharing business bites with you, simple explanations of organizational tools, management techniques, and leadership philosophies that will help you and your businesses thrive. You can listen to Can I Offer You Some Feedback on your favorite podcast app or learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.